Everyone talks about having a voice, but almost no one talks about the power of keeping quiet. Silence is often seen as weakness, yet Carl Jung would say it's in silence that the psyche reorganizes itself. Have you ever noticed that sometimes the one who listens the most is the one who understands the most? The problem is, the ego hates silence. It craves quick answers, instant likes, constant validation. But true spirituality doesn't grow in noise. It's born in the pause. In the next few minutes, you'll discover 5 psychological principles that don't just change the way you think, but reconfigure your internal structure. And we're not talking about motivational techniques or cookie-cutter phrases. We're talking about tools that challenge your persona, confront your shadow, and expand yourself. The world wants you to speak louder. I want you to learn how to listen deeper. There's a kind of silence that isn't the absence of sound, but the absolute presence of attention. Carl Jung said the soul speaks softly and that the ego, being as noisy as it is, rarely hears it. This empty space that listens is not nothingness. It's an inner space where the persona loses its grip and archetypes begin to emerge. It's the moment when you're not trying to answer or form an opinion. You simply allow the other person to reveal themselves. In a conversation, for example, have you noticed that when you stop mentally interrupting, you pick up on things you never would have before? In shadow work, this is the state where internal noise fades, leaving only pure perception. It's as if the world moves more slowly, and you can see past people's words. It's the moment when your gaze reads what words don't say. And for anyone seeking true spirituality, that's pure gold. Imagine walking into a cafe, sitting in a corner and simply observing. You're not participating, but you're perceiving. The couple at the next table is laughing, but their smiles don't reach their eyes. The waiter smiles too, but his body leans back ever so slightly, as if wanting to keep his distance. This emptiness is actually a living laboratory for understanding the ego and the persona in action. Most people walk into a room carrying a pre-written social script, gestures, phrases, expressions they repeat without thinking. But someone who practices this listening emptiness perceives what's in between the lines. And here's the fascinating part. You begin to notice the same in yourself. The micro gesture you make when you're insecure, the subtle change in tone when you're seeking approval. This is where awareness begins to expand. Training the empty space that listens doesn't require meditating on a distant mountaintop. It can start today, in the middle of a conversation. Try not completing sentences in your mind, not preparing your response. Breathe and let the words arrive unfiltered. At first, the ego will squirm. It wants control, it wants to sound smart, to put on the mask of the wise archetype. But with practice, you begin to access something deeper, raw, unpolished perception, free from the persona's varnish. This is where a kind of listening is born that transforms relationships. You realize that most connections don't fail because of a lack of words, but because of a lack of listening. And when you create that space, inevitably something starts to fall. Not out there, but inside. Everyone carries a stockpile of masks, and most don't even realize it. Carl Jung called this social construction the persona, what we wear to navigate the world. At work, you wear the mask of competence. With friends, the mask of humor. At home, perhaps the mask of the strong one who cannot break. But there comes a moment, and it never asks for permission, when those masks start to feel heavy. It's as if your face sweats beneath them, your breathing shortens, and the psychological weight begins to build. Anyone who has done shadow work knows that what exhausts you the most isn't what you do, but what you pretend to be. The fall of the internal masks doesn't happen all at once. It begins with cracks, small moments when you catch yourself acting in line with what you truly feel, instead of what others expect. Curiously, those cracks often appear in unexpected places. A person who has always been pleasant suddenly explodes in traffic. A super sociable friend starts declining invitations without making up excuses. This isn't empty rebellion. It's the self-signaling that something needs to realign. When you take off a mask, no matter how small, you discover a face beneath it that you barely recognize. It's like finding a forgotten room in your own home. Spirituality, at this point, isn't about adding more layers. It's about stripping them away. And each mask that falls creates space for the truest archetypes to emerge, free from the ego's distortion. A practical and uncomfortable exercise to accelerate this process is simple. For an entire day, try not saying anything that isn't absolutely true for you. Don't make promises you don't want to keep. Don't smile unless you mean it. Don't give compliments just to please. At first, your body may even tremble because the persona will fight to stay in control. But if you push through the discomfort, you'll feel something few ever experience: lightness. The fall of the masks is not only liberating, it reorganizes your energy because you no longer spend it maintaining an act. And when the silence of that freedom settles in, you'll notice your inner space breathing in an entirely new way. Then comes the breathing of space. There's a moment after some masks have fallen when you actually feel more air inside yourself. This isn't just a metaphor, it's physiology and spirituality working hand in hand. Jung spoke about how, when the ego is overloaded, it fills every inch of inner space with repetitive thoughts, justifications, and fears. But when the persona weakens, something opens. It's like stepping into a long-locked room and finding the windows thrown wide. This is the breathing of space, a state where you no longer need to fill every silence with action or every minute with tasks. The self is in no rush, and suddenly, pauses in life no longer make you uneasy. The strange thing is that few people know how to cultivate this space. They simply swap one packed schedule for another equally packed, only now with spiritual activities. But spirituality isn't about replacing commitments. It's about leaving room for the unexpected to enter. Think about your day. How many minutes do you leave unfilled? If the answer is 0, your ego is still breathing for you. One simple exercise is to schedule an hour in your week with no title, no goal, no agenda. Just sit, walk, or stare at the sky. At first, your body will itch to grab your phone, your mind will make lists, and anxiety will insist you're wasting time. But if you resist, you'll feel the air change inside. This internal space is what gives you the breath to face hard conversations, make decisions, and even do deeper shadow work. Without it, you're stuck reacting on autopilot, repeating patterns pushed by unconscious archetypes. With it, you pause before acting, and in that pause lives your freedom. The breathing of space isn't a luxury, it's a vital resource to keep the ego from reclaiming the throne. And in that oxygenated silence, something begins to reveal itself. Not a sound, but a call. Something that doesn't shout, but quietly waits to be heard. Not every scream needs sound. Some echo silently within the soul, pressing against the chest, like a whisper that weighs a ton. Carl Jung would call this the shadow's call, the part of the self you've tried to hide for years. The invisible scream shows up in subtle ways, an exhaustion with no clear cause, a tightness before sleep, a sense that something is out of place even when, on paper, everything seems right. The ego tries to smother this scream with distractions, to-do lists, and little escapes. But the more it's ignored, the stronger it becomes, not in volume, but in persistence. It's like a leak that starts as a faint stain on the wall, but eventually can bring the ceiling down. Often, this scream disguises itself as physical symptoms. Constant headaches, insomnia, muscle pain, with no medical explanation. Medicine can treat the effects, but spirituality invites you to look at the root. This is where practices like journaling come in. a way to give form to the scream without letting it explode into the outside world. A simple example. Before bed, write down without any filter everything that bothered you during the day, no matter how petty or childish it seems. This act gives voice to the part of you silenced by the persona. Over time, you'll notice it's not just about what happened that day, it's about what's been stuck inside you for years. At its core, the invisible scream is a request for reconnection. It doesn't want to destroy your life. It wants to free it from the stories you've been carrying like chains. Listening to it takes courage, because it rarely speaks about pleasant things. It reveals wounds, traumas, and distorted archetypes the ego would rather keep buried. But each time you allow yourself to hear it, the scream loses its threatening weight and takes on the tone of a guide. And if you follow that silent sound, you may find yourself in a place few dare to explore, a hidden territory within where, beneath the surface, something secret is already blooming. Inside every person lies a place that never sees direct daylight. Jung might have called it an archetypal hidden territory where memories, pain, and potential are woven together like ancient roots. This is the underground garden, not made of flowers for display, but of seeds that germinate in the dark. It holds parts of you the ego has tried to suffocate, talents dismissed as useless, feelings judged as weakness, desires your persona labeled as wrong. In shadow work, this is where you find the purest raw material for transformation. It's almost ironic. While the world demands exposure, it's in the invisible that true strength grows. Tending to this garden requires a different kind of attention, one that doesn't rush. Practically, it may mean carving out moments of solitude without the pressure to produce anything. Walking aimlessly, cooking slowly, listening to a song over and over until something inside shifts. These actions feed the inner soil, allowing once atrophied parts of you to breathe again. A real example, people who revisit a childhood hobby, drawing, playing an instrument, writing letters, often find they're watering old seeds that only needed space to sprout. This simple act of returning to what was left behind is a form of living spirituality. But the underground garden is also a mirror. It reflects the roots that have rotted, old resentments, inherited beliefs, fears that have been growing in the dark. When you decide to care for it, it's not only about cultivating beauty, but also pulling out what keeps the light from breaking through. And this process isn't instant, it's seasonal. There are days of pruning, days of feeding the soil, and days of simply waiting. The key is to understand that this inner space is sacred, and any rush is a form of violence against it. And as you notice the first timid shoots breaking through, you begin to realize that what hasn't been said, what never left your lips, weighs far more than you ever imagined. Some words don't die just because we never speak them. They settle inside, gain weight, and start shaping everything we do, without us even realizing it. Jung pointed out that what we repress gathers in the unconscious, molding behaviors and even warping our archetypes. When the persona decides it's not the right time or not appropriate to speak, those shelved words become small emotional anchors. An "I love you" that never left your mouth. An "I don't want this" stuck in your throat. A "you hurt me" that never crossed your lips. The ego calls this control. Spirituality calls it self-abandonment. These unspoken words have a peculiar way of showing up. They might become a heaviness in your chest, a constant tension in your jaw, or even habits of self-sabotage whose origin you can't quite place. In shadow work, you learn that every swallowed sentence doesn't vanish. It simply rearranges itself and comes back in another form. It's like shutting the door on an insistent visitor. They won't go away, they'll just start knocking harder. For example, if you avoid saying no to keep the peace, you might find yourself building up small explosions inside, venting your anger in places that have nothing to do with the real cause. The bill always comes due, even if the emotional invoice has no date. Freeing these words doesn't mean spilling everything without a filter. It's about creating a safe space for them to come out. That can be in an honest conversation, in a journal, or even out loud, alone in your car. The goal is to break the pact of silence the ego made to protect the persona. When those words finally meet the air, something shifts physically. Your breathing expands, your body relaxes, even your eyes feel lighter. And strangely, by speaking what was stuck, you stir something deeper. You realize that time isn't as linear as it seems, and that things spoken now can heal wounds from long before. There are moments when time itself seems to behave strangely. Jung saw this in synchronicity, when past, present, and future weave together into a single fabric. The time rift isn't about physical travel, but about an inner opening where old memories blend with present awareness and glimpses of what's to come. It can happen when you hear a song and are instantly transported to a day in childhood, or when you meet someone and feel as if you've known them for decades. In those moments, the ego loses its grip on the neat linear story it clings to, and archetypes take the stage, bringing messages that bypass ordinary logic. This rift can be both dangerous and liberating. Dangerous because, without preparation, the mind can get lost trying to rationalize it. Liberating because it opens the possibility of healing old wounds through present action. In shadow work, there are exercises that explore this weaving of timelines. One is to write a letter to yourself in 3 versions: to the child you once were, to the adult you are now, and to the elder you will become. The simple act of speaking with these different yous expands awareness and dissolves the rigidity with which the ego tries to separate who you were, are, and will be. This isn't mystical, it's deeply psychological and transformative. When this rift opens, subtle perceptions begin guiding your decisions. You avoid a certain road without knowing why, only to learn later there was an accident there. Or you feel almost physically that you need to call someone, and that conversation ends up saving a relationship. Jung would say that in these moments, the self communicates directly, bypassing the persona and pushing past the ego like a door flung open. And when you learn to recognize and accept these cracks in time, you notice your own voice begins to change. It's no longer just yours, it carries echoes of every version of you that has ever existed, and those yet to come. After crossing through emptiness, dropping masks, breathing new spaces, hearing invisible screams, tending underground gardens, releasing trapped words and peering through the rift in time, you don't come back the same. Jung said, individuation isn't about improvement, but integration, and that changes the way you speak and show up in the world. Returning with another voice isn't about speaking louder, it's about speaking with truth. Every word now carries weight because it comes from a place where ego and persona no longer own the script. People notice it, even if they can't explain why. They feel something different in your tone, your pauses, your intention. This new voice doesn't need to be used all the time. In fact, the more you try to flaunt it, the quicker it fades. It shows up naturally when life calls for it, in an intimate conversation, in an unexpected piece of advice, in a decision that demands courage. Maybe someone who used to stay silent in the face of injustice now speaks, not with blind rage, but with steady calm. Or someone who always sought approval realizes they no longer need to repeat others' opinions to belong. This voice doesn't shout to convince, it states to exist. And that's precisely why it resonates, because it's not asking for permission. Returning with another voice is, in practice, a silent pact with the self. From now on, what you say must be rooted in what you live. It's no longer about keeping an image or pleasing social archetypes, but about sustaining words your own body can inhabit. And when this voice returns, it never comes alone. It carries fragments of every silence, pain, and transformation that shaped it. At this point, you realize the journey isn't over, it's simply changed tone. And the question now isn't whether you will speak, but whether you're ready to carry what this voice demands. Now that you understand the power of silence and how it reshapes your inner structure, here comes the most important part, putting it into practice. It's not enough to just watch. These principles prove themselves in your daily life, in the conversations you have, in the moments when your ego wants to speak over everything. Ask yourself, how many times today did I fill space with words that didn't need to be spoken? How many times did I avoid listening, afraid of what I might find? This was just one episode in our journey. Tomorrow, or in the next video, we'll open another door, and I promise you'll leave with questions you've never asked and answers no one else had the courage to give. It's like following that series you just can't stop watching. Each chapter goes deeper, connects more pieces, and makes you see yourself from angles you never imagined. So if something here stirred something in you, subscribe now, turn on notifications, and make a commitment to yourself. Every new video is another step on this path. Don't let the next chapter pass you by, because here, every episode is a key, and you never know which one will open the door you've been searching for all along.